guys, welcome. I'm Jen Frost with Faith in Fabric, and today I'm going to take you through all the steps to make this rosary quilt. Now this video is broken up into chapters as mentioned on the previous slide. I do want to mention that because we've got everything you need to make this quilt. We're going to take you through fabric selections, how to choose the different shades, how to put your blocks together, tips for cutting them, and then lastly, how this was quilted. So let's get started. The first fabric I want to show you is this lovely little additional panel you can purchase for your quilt pattern. So when you purchased your pattern online, you had the option of picking up this lovely little panel. This panel is designed to work directly with your quilt pattern. So you have these lovely little medallions here. There's one in blue and then there's one in gold, if you will. Really, tans and golds. And this one is obviously a little bit more colorful. If you have a lot of color in your quilt, this one is more neutral. You can either cut these out and applique them directly, or you can actually use the dimensions in your quilt that you'll find in the pattern, and you can make these part of the snowball blocks for the miraculous metal block. The other part here is how you say the rosary. I love this part. So there are little directions that start here, and then the colors tie directly into what prayers are said. Obviously the rosary continues, so as you go all the way around, you would repeat this section, and then as you finish right here, you have the Hail Holy Queen in the closing. Now I love this little fabric panel because you can cut here, and then this is designed to go on the back of your quilt. So you've got something special to make for the front, and this extra special piece for the back. Let's talk fabric selection. So you'll want to have a background fabric and a connector fabric that go well together, but that you'll be able to see a contrast because again, those connector bead strips are very, very tiny. So I'll be using this silver gray as my connector and then a bright white with a low volume print as the background. Next, you'll need 3 colors of blues. So I have my nice dark Our Father bead. I have a very light Hail Mary bead here. Again, a lot of these are batiks. I'm sewing from my stash this year. And then my miraculous metals are going to be one of these. Here's a more medium tone batik. And then here's a nice bright one. This is just a regular cotton print. So one of these two will end up being the miraculous metal. And then I'll be using this batik for the cross. Again, it's kind of got that wooden look to it. I like how it's kind of like a grain print, and it'll complement the other batiks very well. These were the originals I started with. They ended up not showing enough contrast, so I replaced the middle Our Father bead with a darker tone. Much better. Working with white on white fabrics, keep a piece of fabric with the selvage still attached nearby. This will help you to always tell which side is the right side. Using pins helps keep long strips aligned, preventing shifting or twisting during sewing. Without pins, fabric layers may slip, causing uneven seams or misalignment, leading to a less precise finished product. Takeaway, use those pins. Okay, so you have your connector piece here, and you'll see if we press the seams open, this is actually going to sink down. And visually, that's not the look we're going for. Now it works, you can absolutely do that. But if you want to kick it up a notch here, what you can do is you can trim your seam allowances down so that they can fold inward. And you'll see once trimmed, now when you press it, this is actually going to pop up and raise a little bit. It is going to make a little bit thicker of a seam allowance to sew through, obviously, a little bit of extra fabrics there because you'll have 5 layers in one spot, but it's going to make much more of that coil look. That's going to make those connector beads actually look like they're connected. Once both your connector pieces and bead blocks are cut based on the instructions on pages 5 and 6 in your pattern, begin chain stitching. Then cut the corners and trim to size. Whatever you do, don't skip squaring your blocks. I made a pink template cut at the unfinished size shown on page 6 of the pattern. You'll see below how perfectly those seams came together once those blocks were squared. Here's a tip. Before you cut your templates, ensure that the measurements shown on one side of the triangle on page 8 is indeed as long as it's indicated in the pattern. I admit I failed to double check the first time I did this, and I ended up with my border over an inch short. You may need to adjust your printer settings to print at 100% or to print at actual size. Another tip for working with your templates, you have to cut quite a few of these. So if you have a pretty steady hand and a strong rotary cutter, you can double your fabric. So you'll see, especially if you're working with batiks, it's great because you never have to worry about which side is up, but it's a lot easier to take your template And if you cut around this now, you'll be cutting 2 for the price of 1. Let's talk briefly about your border pieces. So you'll be making and sewing these little border pieces, and together they'll come together to form the long strip that goes across the top, the bottom, and down the 2 sides. So once you have your little border pieces cut out, here's a few that I've cut. I want to show you how to assemble them. So I recommend chain stitching these as well. So you'll see once you have your centerpiece, you're going to start with one of the top pieces, and they have these little notches. Right here you'll see the notches. The notch, the flat side of the notch is intended to go with the flat side here. So you'll see if I hold this up, bring it nice and close, this little flat side connects to the flat side on this triangle, and when you bring it across, this flat side right here will connect with this edge. And so you can pin these, you can just chain stitch all these, you can hold them in place if you're not a pinner, but this is how you'll be assembling all of your blocks. And again, I do recommend you chain stitch them. And if you do all of one side connection and then fold them up, press them, and then you can come back and do the bottom piece. I want to show you how perfectly this comes together. So if you continue chain stitching in the order we just looked at, then pressing them in all that same direction, because the blocks are going to be rotating, you'll see that the seams will nest perfectly, which on the front, when they nest, you're going to come together with these really, really pretty points all the way through.
Save those scraps. Use any extra pieces you have left over to make the back of your quilt more interesting. These include extra little blocks you've cut, extra pieces that were too small or too short. They make a gorgeous back. Also, don't forget to add the How to Say a Rosary panel to the back of your quilt.
Let's talk about quilting. So now that your design is done, it's time to think about what kind of design you want. Now, here's a link to our Free Motion Fridays where you can find all different background designs. These are all free motion patterns. I debated putting in some pebbles. I thought that might really complement all the different beads. I debated putting in some of these beautiful little flowery swirls, which would complement the flowery fabric. And then I debated putting in, just like kind of jagged lines that cross over each other, because there are already so many seams in the quilt itself. In the end, I think I'm actually going to do straight line stitching. So there are a lot of spots in here where we have these very even straight lines already. So I think it's going to look really nice if I just continue to follow these lines all the way through the quilt. Now, those of you who have the pattern know the size of your blocks. For me, that's a little too far though. I don't want to keep the quilting that far apart. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm using washi tape to break up where I want my lines to be. Now, I love this pack. It comes with all different sizes of washi tape. I'll put a link to it in the comments below. But when you have a lot of different sizes, you can use that washi tape just to play around with. So you'll see here, this is the size I'm going to use. It's a little bit wider. I'm able to put 3 down, and so you'll see when I come back and stitch, I'll come first stitch in the ditch, and then I'll come all the way back through and fill in the 2 spaces in between, and then stitch in the ditch again. Now, when you are sewing, you're going to come straight down. In this case, you can come all the way through. Otherwise, you'll see if these lines, we'll scooch this down a little bit here. So if you pretend that this was all the way up, you would come all the way down here. You would come down this line here, come across, and then go back up. Because you don't want to end up cutting every time you make a line. You're going to really have a lot of threads you're going to have to knot and bury, and it's just not going to be as secure. So make your long lines where you can, hit your stitches, come back up, and then go all the way through. It is worth mentioning, I did go through and I already did an outline. You'll see around everything at about, an 1/8, 1/16 of an inch, real close, just to kind of lock those down so they can pop a little bit. But now it is time to go back and do that final quilting. Now, there are different sizes your washi tape comes in. You can pick wider designs. You can pick much more narrow designs. I went with the thickest design here. Again, I think it's just going to look really pretty to have those straight lines go through. So let's see how everything turned out. So I'm going to take a step back here so you can see. Here's my quilt, and I love, love, love that up and down stitching, that straight line stitching. I feel like really complements all the different beads on here. It really lets the beads pop. Here's how the back turned out. So I told you I like to use up all my scraps. So here is my back. Here's all those little extra scrap pieces. I'll bring it a little closer so you can see. Here is the instructions on how you say the rosary. I have those on the back, and I actually ended up putting both the medallions on the back as opposed to putting them on the front.
A lot of that was, to be honest with you, a shipping issue. By the time they arrived, I had already completed my quilt top. So you can always put yours right here. I just put mine on the back. So little late shipping there. But if you have any questions, please feel free to leave me a comment. This was an absolute joy to make with you guys today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.